Now, like if you see me foaming at the mouth here, that's just because I'm so excited to talk about allocations, right? Because this is stuff, like I said, this is where the what is it, the cliche where the rubber meets the gravel. What's the cliche, guys? Help me out.
The road.
The road.
Yeah.
Thank you. Partnership allocation, 704B. Just open your code to code section 704B. Okay? Now, partners, let's just start. What do we know about S corporations? Can S corporations allocate income and losses as it pleases? No. Why? I mean, for all, you can't really, because there can only be one class of stock, right? Everyone agree that's one major limitation. You can be voting and non-voting, but you can't have preferred, and you can't have special allocations, okay? So, it's a big difference, right? When we talk about chapter 1 versus what we're now going to look at. So partners could, depending if I'm a partner with whomever, we can allocate income and losses as we please, but there are restrictions, okay? We're not giving, the code does not give carte blanche to people like myself, our clients, or you, to allocate losses as you please. And you may have missed it, doesn't jump off the page, but as Viva is my witness, what do I have highlighted in red here, Viva? That was the softest voice in the world.
Substantial economic effect.
Substantial economic effect. Where's that found? Viva, what code section?
704B2.
704B2. Everyone see substantial economic effect? All right. That's going to be pivotal. And when you want to make these allocations, you must meet this standard. A substantial economic effect. And insofar as this effect is met, look at page 111. There's a case that really definitely illustrates this proposition. We have a two-person partnership, right? C and O, because I can't pronounce anyone's. I have a hard enough name with first names, forget about last names. You have C and O. And C has no need for losses. So all the losses are allocated to taxpayer O, right? The partnership agrees that the partnership losses will be allocated to partner O. And this results in O commanding the losses, C not commanding the losses. O's capital account, when you get allocated losses, does your capital account go up or down, guys?
Down.
Down. Down. And that should mean something, right? No one wants to see their capital account go down, right? Don't want to see your capital. Now, that's with one major caveat. You don't want your capital account to go down, but if you ain't going to respect your capital account, who cares, right? In other words, if it goes down, but at the end of the day, when the partnership is liquidated, and I'm partners with Minna, and he allocates the losses to me, but at the end of the day, we just say, you know what, wink, wink, let's just split whatever proceeds are 50-50. We ignore our capital accounts. Who's the only loser in that equation? The government, right? So if Minna has no uses for the losses, Solid has lots of uses for losses, and I get the losses, he doesn't, he's indifferent, right? Because he couldn't use them anyway. I could, I get the tax benefit, but I don't bear any consequences of getting the loss. I do, it's a positive consequence, I get a tax write-off, but there are no downward consequences. Because normally when a capital account goes down, economically, I'm not a happy camper. By the way, someone pointed out, you know what week this is, guys?
3.
What week?
3.
I've been told it's palindrome week.
What?
Palindrome week.
Look at that.
You guys don't know what the word palindrome means?
No.
Say again, Hoffman.
You can write the dates from both sides.
What?
In other words, the word wow is a palindrome.
Okay.
Okay? Because you can read it backwards, it says the same thing forward. And let's just do it today. It is 9, 11, 19. But if you write it backwards, 9, 11, 19. And this whole week is a palindrome week. Tonight, across the table with whomever you are, you may want to talk about partnership tax, but you can call to their attention it's palindrome week. Suzuka, did you know that? Now you do.
My friends are gonna unfriend me if I use that word.
There are some really good palindromes out there, guys.
That sounds like a bird.
Alpha, did I pronounce it correctly? It's pronounced. All right, well, if anyone finds out I'm wrong, let me know. All right, so this case, guys, talks about what was the old rule, and you couldn't have special allocations if the principal purpose was tax avoidance. There's a surprise. Again, the old rule was you couldn't have special allocations if the purpose behind the allocation was tax avoidance. Congress refined the rule, took it up a notch, and said, you know what? Let's add something to it, some meaningful words. And they added the word substantial economic effect, which the regulations will bifurcate and say you have to meet the economic effect and then deal with the issue of substantiality. So we're going to see if it has become a two-pronged test. So when you read through this case, this is an old case now, 50 years old. Who wins or loses? Not surprisingly, no one's going to fall off their chair when I tell you the taxpayer lost, right? That if you have a special allocation and the capital accounts are not maintained, then the allocations cannot have substantial economic effect. And if you recall in chapter 2, where the authors discuss maintaining capital accounts, the maintenance of capital accounts is one of the key demarcation points whether or not special allocations will be respected. So you gotta maintain capital accounts. And you gotta respect them, or your clients do. All right? Now, if you don't meet the substantial economic effect, where does that leave you? You do not go straight to purgatory. All right? You might think so, but the default rule is the PIP rule. What is the PIP rule? That's an acronym for you divvy up the income and losses based on the partner's interest in the partnership. Partner's interest in partnership. PIP. Partner's interest in partnership. Okay? So, in other words, Congress had to have consequences associated with failure to meet the substantial economic effect test. This is spelled out on the top of page 119. So the authors introduce us to this case. The case, at least in my mind, is a good way to start because in that case, the one that I can't pronounce, one of many, the taxpayer there allocated depreciation deductions to one taxpayer, as we said. It was not, it was allocated to the capital accounts, but the capital accounts weren't respected, and we saw the consequences. So now what the authors are going to do, beginning on page 120, is they are going to try to elucidate what is the meaning of substantial economic effect. Let me just tell you if you look on page 120, the author cites code section 704B, and they cite to the regulations. And people, students, will periodically say, hey, how can I do better in partnership? What is the secret? Can I give away the secret? You guys want to know the secret? Read the regulations.
It's
Because
147 pages.
the regulations are long, they are not short.
I seriously, I'm like.
They are, all right, but notice something, guys. The regulations, and the authors make clear that they borrow heavily from the regulations in drafting the language in the textbook, right? In my experience, is that's true for anyone writing in this area, is that the regulations are really, if you give it the time, it takes a lot of time, Elizabeth, admittedly. If you go through them,
I just spent the whole semester just reading.
if you go through them, particularly the examples, it's very hard for exam purposes to get too far away from them. So, you know, when anyone's trying to put together questions, you'll see whether it's these authors or if you guys have a supplementary textbook or for exam purposes, it's very hard to veer from those examples. So notwithstanding that they're painstaking, they're long, there's many permutations to them, go through them, spend the time. And if you have questions where you're stymied or flummoxed or pick your favorite SAT word, then let me know and let's see what we can do to get you to the pathway of knowledge, okay? So my message to you is don't just read the code 704B and say, you know what? I know what substantial economic effect is now. You will not, no offense to you or anyone else, no one can just read the code and know what this is about, guys. So you really got to invest the time. Like, there's no shorthand of doing it. Now the authors help you, so in terms of, you might want to read the textbook first and then read the regulations as opposed to trying to read the regulations. Because the authors are very good at what they do, in my opinion. But you can't just read the textbook and say, now I have command. I would, were I in your shoes, read the textbook, but then read the regulations and read it actively, okay? Read it with a pen in hand. Don't just read it passively and just nod. Read it and underline and write numbers in the margins, okay? That will be much more productive than just reading along, all right? So the authors point out on page 120 that we have this bifurcated test of economic effect and substantiality. Not surprisingly, on page 121, they talk about the importance of maintaining capital accounts, which again, if you're feeling a little woozy on this, go back to chapter 2. Go back and look at those pages which the authors discuss maintaining a capital account. They are excellent, an excellent overview of how to maintain capital account. Okay, on page 122, the authors talk about, they give you some stock language that I have seen in partnership agreements at the very top. The first paragraph is some generic language that you might see in a partnership agreement. Often partnership agreements, LLC agreements that I've seen, cross-reference the regulations just in this fashion. I would say, Michael, you've dealt with a number of partnerships, right, Michael? You see partnerships with language like this? Michael? Is that? I'm talking to you. You keep pointing. Yes, you. So you've seen a lot of partnerships with this kind of language, okay? And you'll see on page 122, 123, items that will cause partnership capital accounts to go up and down. And again, this is critical for you or your client that they really look at the numbers of their capital accounts because it truly represents their economic stake in the enterprise. And at the risk of repetition, if the partnership incurs a liability, does that cause the capital account to go up? No. Everyone agree? Does it cause outside basis to go up? Yes. What's our authority? What code section?
722.
7 what?
22?
52.
52, sorry.
7:52. Told you, you need some caffeine in that water. Okay?
Before the exam.
All right. So, on page 124, the author is talking that first full paragraph. Some capital accounts generally don't reflect necessarily the current value, but there are events that cause them to be upwardly adjusted to reflect current value. Page 124. You guys ready? We're about to get into the, again, substantial economic effect. I forewarned you. It's a two-pronged test. Economic effect and then substantiality. And just so you know, Elizabeth, you'll appreciate this. So in the regulations, which are not easy to find yourself, right? Elizabeth, is that a fair statement that they're not easy to find yourself? Under 704-1B2 in the regulations, just to make it somewhat, again, GPS, we all love our GPS. I have taken liberties in my regulations to write at the top of each page what this page really stands for. So the first page deals with substantial economic effect and overview. And I, Elizabeth, the authors only of our abridged version only go out to 1-B2, but then just to find myself more easily, because 1-B2 goes on for 20, 30 pages, but to find myself, I add one little I to two little I, and then on the next page it goes from two little I, C through D, and it deals with economic effect, this page. The next page deals with economic effect E through H. The next page deals with substantiality, that's three little I, A through B. Next page deals with, my point is, if you want to make your regulation book more useful, I would spell out in more detail what each page of the regulation refers to, and then on the top, try to caption it with what it refers to. Okay? Because by doing that, again, you become an active reader, and it will be, for exam purposes, easier to find something if you need to reference it.
So which pages do we need for 701-1B2?
Right, but then elaborate each one at the top what it refers to.
So we need all of them?
No, with the authors, it goes on for like 8 pages. So at the top of each one, I have substantiality, and then the next few pages deal with maintenance, how to maintain capital accounts. Because guys, like you, last I checked, I bleed, you bleed, right? We're all mortal here. For me to find myself, I want to be able to, hopefully during class, not spend 10 minutes trying to find a cross-reference, right? And when I'm trying to figure out the problems or working on the material, it's just easier if you do it. And it forces me, hopefully it will force you, to be an active reader, all right? And by doing this, it's a useful exercise. So I encourage you, I'm not forcing anyone, you do it your own way, but again, to make your life easier, in my opinion, use it as an occasion to mark. These regulations are very detailed, complicated, but there's no shortcut, guys. There's no one who says, gee, I can just I can deal with just the code. You mortals deal with the regulations. All right, so bearing that in mind, that's my hint for tonight. Page 124 deals with the economic effect, and these, again, the authors are just extrapolating from the regulations, and they do a great job. Kudos to them. They say for economic effect, you've got to meet the big three. They refer to it as the big three. These are spelled out on page 125, and obviously they're cross-referenced in footnotes 46, 47, and 48. Page 125. What are the big things? Capital accounts must be determined and maintained in accordance with the rules of section or regulation 704-1B2 for little I. That makes sense. We've got to maintain capital accounts. Item 2, upon liquidation of the partnership or the partner's interest, liquidating distributions must be made in accordance with a positive capital account, right? So capital accounts are supposed to mean something. And finally, if there's a deficit, okay, on liquidation, the partner must be unconditionally obligated to restore the deficit by the later of the following 2 days. So if for some reason the capital account, remember this is not, can basis ever go negative? No, basis can never go negative. Can capital accounts go negative? Yes, right? And if it does, that's supposed to delineate that the person who has a negative capital account is supposed to owe money back to the partnership.
Depending on the contract.
Oh, depending on what?
The contract that they have signed.
Well, we'll talk about that in a moment, but just in terms of keeping things simple for the moment, these are the big three, okay? So if I refer to the big three, you're at the water cooler tomorrow and someone says, oh, partnership meet the big three, here they are. And there's language on the bottom of page 125, top of page 126, that you might see in a partnership agreement, right? This is the author's just giving you some stock language to meet the big three. And the author's starting on page 126, the first full paragraph. The rationale for the big three should be apparent. Unless tax allocations of income or loss are accompanied by increase or decreases to the partner's capital account, there are no way to assure that the tax consequences will ever reflect the partner's economic business deal. So in other words, it's just supposed to reflect reality. And if a partner gets allocated a deduction, they should bear the consequences. We're going to see, and this is going to be important, on top of page 127, there's a presumption. If you look at the third line down, it says, assume further, as the regulations generally require, and there's a cite to a regulation which is an important one, that the fair market value of property is generally equal to its adjusted basis. I'll repeat, that the fair market value of property is assumed to be equal to adjusted basis. And we'll see the importance of this momentarily. But I'll just call it to your attention right now. Is deficit restoration a good or bad thing if you're a partner? Do you care or not care about deficit restoration?
The partnership should care.
Partnership cares, but do you want deficit restoration? And Chrissy, you're shaking your head. Why not?
Because then when you liquidate the partnership, you're gonna pay back.
Yeah, it's payback time, and most limited partners, right, they don't want to be on the hook for anything, right? By the very nature, right, of being a limited partner, you want to limit your liability, right? Same thing if you're a member in an LLC, you want to limit your liability, agree? So the notion of having an unlimited deficit restoration, guys, how do we say it, can freak out some partners because that's not what they bargained for. Everyone agree? So they may not meet the third test, right? Everyone agree? They may not sign off on having unlimited deficit restoration. Agreed? Everyone understand the economics, right? Because that's not what they bargained for. So is there a plan B, or will they never meet the economic effect test? And there is a plan B, which is spelled out right below. When I say right below, on page 128, there is something known as a qualified income offset, okay? That as long as they do not go below zero, the allocation will be respected. As long as their capital account does not go below zero, the allocation will be respected. And if by accident they do go below zero because things can happen, right? By accident, it could go below zero. The qualified income offset said will require that as soon as the partnership has income, that income must be immediately allocated to them to try to get them back up to zero. Okay? So the notion is that they may not meet the third leg of the big three test, but as long as the partnership agreement contains terms which include a qualified income offset, which essentially says, hey, no allocation to you below zero will be effective, and if you happen to go below zero, going forward, all income has to be allocated to you to get you back up to zero. And we're going to see how this works in a moment. I'm not really worried about the new proposed regulations on 129 and 130s for your purposes. There's other things you have to worry about. It's not entirely clear what's going to happen to those regs. So take a look on page 130. So page 130 still pertains to the qualified income offset. And if you look at the paragraph that begins alternate economic effect special rules, you look 4 or 5 lines down, it says to prevent such gambits, everyone see that? The regulations require for purposes of the alternate test, that's the qualified income offset, partners must reduce their capital accounts by distributions that are reasonably expected, okay? As of the end of the partnership year in which the loss allocation was made. Okay, so again, with respect to this third leg test, if there's anticipated distributions, they must be taken into account before loss allocations are made under this qualified income offset. I hope I can deliver. I know, Elizabeth, the examples in the regulations the authors direct you to give you very straightforward examples of exactly what this is referring to, but we're going to see a problem or two dealing with this momentarily. Okay? One more thing I'll just call to your attention. On the bottom of page 131, 5 lines up to the right, it says a qualified income offset is a provision in the partnership agreement stating that any partner who has a deficit capital account as a result of unexpectedly receiving a distribution must be allocated items of future income or gain in an amount and a manner sufficient to eliminate any remaining deficit balance as quickly as possible. Again, my point in calling that to your attention is the qualified income offset is designed to say, okay, if for some reason you accidentally go negative, all the income has to be allocated to you as quickly as possible. All right, so that's the economic effect test, and if you don't meet these tests, again, what's the default? You go to the partner's interest in the partnership, or PIP. Substantiality. You recall that we not only have to meet the economic effect test, we have to meet the substantiality test. And substantiality comes down to, spelled out on page 133. If you look under pre-tax variance, the regulations governing the quote-unquote substantiality and allocation open by articulating the following standard, and here's the standard. The economic effect of an allocation is considered to be substantial. There is a reasonable possibility that the allocation will affect substantially the dollar amounts to be received by the partners from the partnership, independent of the tax consequences. Now, you may want to underline on the next page. So that's what substantiality aims for. But on the next page, if you look at the after-tax rule, Anyone have that, the after-tax rule? On the next page. Here's when you know something is not substantial. If the after-tax economic consequences of at least one partner may, in present value terms, be enhanced compared to such consequences if the allocation were not contained in the partnership agreement. So at least one partner is better off, and I'm going to paraphrase, no partner is worse off, then the agreement probably lacks substantiality. In other words, the allocation lacks substantiality if one partner is better off from a tax perspective and no other partner is worse off, then it is likely that the allocation lacks substantiality. So the example on page 135, the authors offer, is if you have one taxpayer, A, who's taxed at a 30% rate, and taxpayer B, who's taxed at a 15% rate, who do you want to allocate the tax exempt income to, and who do you want to allocate the taxable income to? You want to allocate the tax exempt to the taxpayer in the higher marginal tax bracket, right? And allocate the taxable income to the taxpayer in the lower tax bracket. And guess what? In this case, both are going to be better off, right, from a tax perspective. Neither is going to be worse off, and they're getting the same dollars, but they're just doing these allocations purely for tax reasons. So, yes, it has economic effect because it's going to be reflected in their capital accounts, but it lacks substantiality under this test, and therefore this special allocation would not be respected. So if you have special allocations, which are entirely tax-driven, guys, guess what? They're not going to be respected for tax purposes. So when you talk to your clients and they're like, well, this is great, we can allocate whatever we want to whomever we want, and I get these questions periodically. Oh, someone has an expiring tax loss. Can we allocate him income this year and we'll make it up next year to the other people? No, you can't just play games in terms of those kind of tax strategies. All right? But if there's a reason that partner A is working really hard and for whatever reason he or she deserves more income this year, you can make that allocation, right? You can make that special allocation. The other partners are going to suffer consequences. They're going to have less money, right, as a result. All right. So, the authors take a very straightforward example on page 135, like I just said, and it's easy to understand. Now, substantiality comes in two flavors, your notes. There's shifting and transitory. What's the difference between shifting allocations and transitory allocations? Shifting allocations are those kind of allocations that occur in the same year. That in the same year, there's going to be some sort of offset. So shifting allocations involve allocations that during the same year may result in one taxpayer doing better and no other taxpayer doing worse. By way of contrast, transitory allocations are those allocations which over a multi-year tax period, one taxpayer is better and no taxpayer is worse off. So again, the regulations articulate this, but the notion of substantiality can be broken down between shifting and transitory. And unlike sometimes where I say, and I will stand by this credo that you always do need authority, many of these allocations, guys, have sort of the smell test, right? Where if you take a step back for a moment and you think to yourself, if you were Congress, would you permit this allocation? Have a gut reaction. Once you have a gut reaction, I encourage you to look at the regulations. But many of these, if you just take a step back, you like saying, I see why these are not going to be respected. All right? So just the examples in the regulations that Elizabeth has pondered and that hopefully many of you have also pondered. none of them should come as a surprise what the ultimate outcome is. In the revenue ruling 99-43, they describe a special allocation to someone who's an insolvent taxpayer. And wouldn't it be nice if you could allocate income to an insolvent taxpayer? Because why? They might not have to take that money into income because they're insolvent. And that special allocation, what do you think? Would it work or not work? Probably not gonna work, right guys? And so take a look, it's not, this revenue ruling, not a hard revenue ruling to follow. And the very nice thing about it, on pages 142 and 143, the authors of the revenue ruling go through exactly how the shifting and transitory allocations work. On page 145, we get into PIP, okay? And PIP, I know this is gonna bother some of you, is an amorphous application. It is not black and white that, oh, now we default and now we know with specificity how we're gonna, remember, if you don't meet substantial economic effect, you default into PIP. So you might think PIP, the government or the Treasury Department is gonna outline with specificity exactly what the consequences are. No, that's not the case. They give you, the regulations give you a list of factors on page 146 of items to consider. 1, 2, 3, 4. And based on those items and those factors, they will come up, or theoretically the IRS will come up with an allocation method. The takeaway from this, in my opinion, is that in most instances, your clients are going to be well advised. Why are your clients going to be well advised? Because they're hiring you. So that, you know, they should by definition be well advised. They should never default into PIP, okay? They should never default into PIP because well advised clients will have allocations which have substantial economic effect. What I have found, it's those clients who do not have good accounting counsel or legal counsel, who after the fact, they're being audited, and now it's too late to find substantial economic effect, and now you're negotiating with the IRS over what the allocations should be. But again, the best defense is the right offense and get this substantial economic effect. I'm saying a lot, there's a lot for you to absorb, but I think my goal is the next 39 minutes is that if we can go through these problems and I really get your attention, I will open doors. And Elizabeth, I will make your life easier if you revisit the regulations. All right, so everyone ready to give me everything they've got for the next 39 or 38 minutes. And let's just go through this, because once I go through it, I am very confident that you're gonna have a much better command of this, okay? So we have in page 150, A and B contribute $100,000 upon formation of a limited partnership. A is a general partner, B is a limited. The partnership purchases an office building and land for $200,000, elects straight line depreciation, and that the property has a 10-year recovery period. We're skipping the mid-month convention on all those things that are near and dear to my heart. You can do the arithmetic. 10 years of depreciation, $20,000 a year. Everyone agree? Good. What I want to hear. The partnership agreement allocates all items of income and loss equally, with the exception of the cost recovery deductions, which are allocated entirely to B. Okay? Entirely to B. So in this case, just by way of example, because I like to use real people, Ron, you'll be A, Nikki, you'll be B. Okay? So we're going to role play here. Okay? Ron, you're A, Nikki, you're B. And it says that, so Nikki, you're the winner or loser, depending on how you want to look at it. Glass half full, half empty, I don't care. You're getting the depreciation deductions of $20,000 per year. Everyone got that? Everyone get the visual? Okay? So we got real people, real deductions here. And assume, perhaps unrealistically, that Ron and Nikki are obligated to restore deficit. And truth be told, that Nikki's not a happy camper. She didn't bargain for that, right? Nikki, did you bargain for that? You're supposed to be more emphatic and say, hell no, you didn't want this liability. That's why you're a limited partner. Right, that's what Nikki, right, telling in her words, right, Kevin? All right, so Nikki's feeling it, she's not saying it, right? She does not want unlimited liability. Everyone agree? She's a limited partner, never bargained for it, right? Assume apart from the cost recovery deductions, the partnership rental income is equal to the operating expenses. What must the partner's respective capital accounts be at the end of year one for the allocation of cost recovery deductions or to have economic effect? All right, so you guys ready for this? All right, I'm ready. All right, so we have to start off with our capital accounts, right? And again, Ron is A, Nikki is B for our purposes. Ron, what's your capital account start at?
100.
Just say it loudly.
100.
100. Nikki, what's yours? Everyone agree? And at the end of the year, what's Chrissy, what's your capital accounts?
For A,
Yeah, for A and B.
for A is still 100.
A is 100 and B?
80.
Everyone agree, 80, right? Because Nikki got allocated. Now, keep in mind, we are looking at capital accounts. I know in the past students get confused. We are not looking at adjusted basis. For your notes, this is purely to see if there's substantial economic effect. Do not in your notes confuse this with adjusted basis. Everyone with me? This is purely looking at capital account maintenance. Agreed? Right? So for your notes, when you look back, in big letters, Solon said capital accounts, not adjusted basis, because otherwise it can get perplexing. Okay. So everyone's happy with that answer. Everyone happy? Okay? Now, and this is just under the general regulation 704-1B2, 4 little I. I'll repeat, 704-1B2, 4 little i's. Question B. Assume the partnership sells the building on January 1st of year 2 and immediately liquidates. Again, with an eye towards qualifying the allocation, how much the proceeds be distributed? The building, let's say, is sold for 180. The building is sold for 180. In that case, how are the proceeds going to be? Aya, I'm practicing your name if I said it right. How are we going to divvy up the proceeds if the building is sold for 180? Any thoughts, Aya? Not sure, Ken? John? John, you got an answer? I don't hear you. Okay, you don't know? Not sure? Anyone want to risk an answer here? Are we going to divvy it up?
Equally.
Because he
We,
wants me to pay.
you got to respect, it's the old, will you respect me in the morning type of thing? Will you respect these capital accounts in the morning? If you respect them in the morning, got to be divvied up how? That 180.
180.
100 to Ron, 80 to Nikki, right? So Nikki felt the pain of that cost recovery deduction. Yeah, it felt good going down because she got a $20,000 write-off, but economically, she faced some real consequences, right? She's only going to get 80,000. Agreed? That's what it's all about. Pause. Everyone got that? That if the building is subsequently sold for 180, that has to respect these capital accounts. One partner gets 100, the other partner gets 80. Now suppose it was sold, and the next question for 200,000.
What do you need to pay?
Say again?
120 to A and B to 80.
Why does A get allocated
No.
$20,000 profit? How much was
100
the gain on the building for book
20.
purposes?
B to
So 110 to A and 90 to B, right?
How is that $20,000 of profit going to be divided? What is the partnership agreement?
Equally.
50-50, right? Because Ron and Nikki are going to split those profits 10 and 10. Their capital accounts would go up, and how are they going to split the 200,000? 110 and 90. You want authority? I know you do. So, if you look, and I know Elizabeth will back me on this, there are several examples in the regulation. This is right on point. Regulation 704-1B5, example 1, 5 little I. When I say 5 little I, by the way, don't put 5 little i's. Roman numeral 5, guys, okay? Just in case you were thinking otherwise, okay? So again, that's, the regulation is 704-1B5, example 1, 5 little I, okay? Right, the authors were essentially copying. I mean, that's all it is. Everybody see that? That's what maintaining capital. The partnership agreement says to split profits 50-50, right, guys? Run or roll. Question C? Everyone got that? Question C. Assume the agreement further provides that gain on the disposition will be allocated to B to the extent of the cost recovery deductions specially allocated to Nikki, to her. So remember, Nikki got the $20,000 deduction. What result when the partnership sells the building on January 1st of year 2 for $200,000? So, question C, the partnership agreement allocates, remember it says, what result when any gain will be allocated to B to the extent of the real cost recovery deductions specially allocated to her. Now, does that smell a little fishy?
Yeah.
Look, because let me just tell you what the answer is, and then let's see if it looks a little fishy. Because who's going to be allocated the gain here? Their capital accounts at the end of the year are 180, right? Respectfully, and that $20,000 gain is going to be allocated to whom?
B.
Nikki, right? To B, right? So her capital account will go up to 100, right? And how are the proceeds going to be split?
Equally.
100 and 100, right? So in theory, you're thinking to yourself, something smells in Denmark, right? Something's wrong with this, right? What is it? Because you remember what I said to you about the regulations? What was the assumption you're supposed to make? That the fair market value, the regulations assume that fair market value is always equal to the adjusted basis in the property. And the takeaway, and I'll give you a cite for that in a moment, is that Nikki had no clue, did you, Nikki, that this property was going to go back up to 200,000, right? Because the regulations actually say that the property is going to decline in value economically, right? So, yeah, this partnership agreement had that recapture provision, but because of that assumption, there was no way for Nikki to know that, oh, she'll get a tax load this year, but next year she'll make up for it, right? So the regulatory site for that says basis is equal to fair market value, excuse me, the exact, fair market value is equal to adjusted basis. The regulatory site is 704-1B2, 3 little i's, C. I'll repeat, 704-1B2, 3 little i's, C. And I know Elizabeth is waiting for another example. It's under 704-1B5. By the way, 704-1B5 have all the examples. This is under example 1, 6 little I, and 11 little I. Okay, 6 little I and 11 little I. That point out that a gain chargeback is not a problem. Gain chargeback is not a problem. Okay?
But she will get taxed on the 20K, right?
She will get taxed on the 20K. She will get taxed on the 20K. Okay? Question D. Assume that B is not required to restore, so Nikki says, excuse my language, we'll punch it. Screw it. I do not want to be on the, Nikki, right? You do not want to be on, you do not want to have your neck out here, right? So you're not going to be on a deficit restoration. But the partnership agreement includes a qualified income offset because Nikki wants to meet, right, the substantial economic effect. And even though she doesn't have a deficit restoration, right, Plan B is she must have a qualified income offset. Agreed? Everyone with me? And if you don't meet the big three, you should have a qualified income offset. Okay? If the partnership continues to operate the building, what results in A and B in year 1 and in year 6? So let's talk about this. In year 1, okay? And by the way, I'll just call to your attention because why not? This is under the alternate test, which we already said. And yes, Elizabeth, this is example 1 in the regulations, 2 little I and 3 little I, okay? So once again, it's under 704-1B5, example 1, 2 little I and 3 little I, which delineate the application of the alternate test. And in year 1, right, you start off with 100 each, A and B. And after 1 year, does that have substantial economic effect, guys? Even though she doesn't meet the big three? Yes or no? I'm supposed to hear a chorus of yes, right? Because she meets the alternate test. Agreed? Everyone with me? All right? And like everything else in life, years go on, right? And every year, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. Year 5, Nikki's down to 0, right? Everyone see that? Nikki's down to 0. Meanwhile, Ron's living the highlight, the Vita Loca, he's still at 100, right? What happens in year 6? What happens in year 6? Say again, Minna? Who will be negative? B? B meaning Nikki? Can Nikki now go negative? Does she have any obligation to restore the deficit? Well, hold on. Before we talk about that, does Nikki have any deficit restoration? No, the partnership agreement, Nikki wanted out, right? She has no deficit restoration. Can we have a negative capital account here, guys?
Yes.
No. Why? How?
What?
Doesn't it say, Nikki, would this have substantial economic effect if we allocated $20,000 in deduction to her? She has no legal obligation to make it up, right? Didn't we agree Nikki wanted out, that she has no deficit restoration?
But at this point, if the company generates loss or the partnership generates losses,
It does.
okay, so she can't be negative anymore?
She's not negative, she's at 0, right?
Right.
This is year 6.
Right.
Her capital account has been reduced to 0.
Right.
And she has no deficit restoration under the partnership agreement.
Okay.
Who gets the $20,000 deduction? Does it just disappear?
No.
Person A gets it. Ron gets it, right? Because that will have substantial economic effect. Because what is the building deemed to be worth in year 6? What do we say under the regulations, guys? It's presumed to be worth $80,000. That if this building is sold, guess who's going to get the $80,000? Ron, you're supposed to raise your hand. Ron, A's going to get the $80,000, right? Does that make sense? Nikki shouldn't get it because it's not going to have any consequences to her, right? If we gave Nikki the deduction, she would have a negative capital account, no obligation to restore. And Ron, on the other hand, would be out $20,000. He's the one who should have gotten the deduction because the building sold. It's only going to be sold for $80,000. She's not required to restore the deficit.
So B cannot go below 0.
Right. B said it specifically the agreement. She said is in question D. says B is not required to restore the deficit, so she cannot go below 0. All right? All right? Don't call it her basis. Her capital account has been reduced to 0. So in this circumstance, essentially, again, in question D, what ends up happening is HIP takes over, and it must be allocated this 20,000 in accordance with the partner's interest in the partnership, okay? And if you take into account all the economic consequences, it makes sense that taxpayer A is going to be allocated, must be allocated, the $20,000 deduction. And Elizabeth would quote example 1, 4 little I, 5 little I, and 6 little I support this proposition. Question 8. What results in both years under the facts of D, okay, if in addition B contributed a promissory note for $100,000 to the partnership? So now Nikki is obligating herself as taxpayer B to throw in an extra $100,000, right? She's going to be up. Now, does that change her capital account? No, okay? The contribution of a promissory note does not increase her capital account from 100 to 200,000, okay? Does not. You want authority for that? 704-1B2, 4 little i's, D2. I'll repeat. 704-1B2, 4 little i's, D2. Now, can Nikki go negative? Can Nikki or taxpayer B go negative here?
Yes.
Yes, because now she has, because of the promissory note, an economic obligation to restore that 20,000, right? So here she can go negative. Okay, what's my authority? If you look at 704-1B5, example 1, 9 little I, she can go negative. Okay, she can go negative. Nikki can go negative. But what taxpayer B / Nikki has one concern here that I just for your notes that you should consider. What is Nikki's outside tax basis? We looked at capital account. What's her outside tax basis? It's 100,000, right? And after 5 years, what's her outside tax basis? It's 0, right? So what that means is in year 6, because of code section 704D that we just looked at, her loss is suspended, right? Because she doesn't have adequate outside tax basis. So I'm just calling that your attention. Right now we're just talking about maintaining capital accounts and the fact that Nikki can go down to negative 20,000. She could go up to a negative 100,000, right? Because her promissory note causes her to be obligated on the hook for up to 100,000. Just pointing out, for tax purposes, under 704D, this loss would be suspended. Even though it's allocated to her, the loss itself would be suspended. Question F. What results in the above if in year 6 the building had a $400,000 fair market value and A and B, acting as partners, agree that they will borrow $200,000 on a recourse basis, using the building as security and distribute the proceeds to them equally to themselves early in year 7. Okay? So question E, they're going to borrow the money. Right, that in the beginning of year 6, A still has a capital account of 100, right? Nikki's B, and capital account is 0. Everyone agree? And I will call to your attention, you remember for the qualified income offset, that you have to anticipate distributions, right? That reasonable, I called that to your attention and I'll give you the regulatory side, but I called to your attention the fact that under the qualified test, you have to take into account anticipated distributions, okay? And the regulatory site for this, let me just give it to you for your notes, is that regulation 704-1B2, 2 little I D6. I'll repeat, 704-1B2, 2 little i's D6. So the qualified income offset test requires that we anticipate distributions. Guess what? We anticipate, right, the partnership's going to borrow $200,000 and distribute it. What does that do to our capital accounts? Reduces it, right? Can Nikki go to negative 100 based on the fact pattern E? Yes, right? She can go, okay? But in year 6, there's another $20,000 worth of deductions, right? There's another $20,000 worth of deductions. Where must that $20,000 of deductions be allocated to?
A.
A. All right? Because A in Iran would bear the consequences if this property is sold at a loss. Nikki would not. Nikki would not bear the consequences. Okay? Question G. What resulted in the facts of E above if in year 6 the value of the building is $300,000, A and B acting as partners agree that when it reaches $400,000, they will take out a $200,000 recourse mortgage and distribute the proceeds equally. Will this have any bearing? And what the authors are trying to say is, recall that in the facts of E above it says, if A and B agree that when its value reaches $400,000, what do the regulations presume? The regulations presume that the value of this building will never go up, right? So it cannot be reasonably anticipated that a distribution will be made. So in this case, in the case here, A will have a capital account of 100, B will have a capital account of 0, and here B can be allocated the deduction. Why? Because the way the problem is framed is that when the value goes up, the distribution will be made. Well, at least under the regulations, the presumption is the fair market value of the building will always equal its adjusted basis. So there's no expectation that the value of the building will go up. Okay, so for your notes, the B can be allocated the deduction. Okay? B can be allocated the deduction. All right. So this just gives you a quick taste of substantial economic effect and the consequences captured in the capital accounts, and we can talk more about this. Let's look at problem 2. C and D are equal partners designed to produce clothing sales to retailers located in Europe and the U.S. D is a non-resident alien, meaning D does not pay U.S. tax unless D has a trade or business in the United States, or D gets what's called FDAP income, right? So generally, D does not get taxed on U.S. income, okay, generally, or U.S. sourcing. The relative dollar amounts of the U.S. and foreign income cannot be predicted. I underline that, okay? And at the beginning of the year, the partnership does not know how much U.S. income will be earned, how much foreign income will be earned. Any foreign income will be allocated to D, who is exempt from U.S. tax. Assume the following allocations have economic effect. Okay, so now we're not looking into economic effect, we're looking into substantiality. Okay, question 2, the authors are raising the issue of substantiality. what result if the partnership agreement provides that all U.S. source income will be allocated to C and all foreign source income will be allocated to D? Okay? Does that seem to have substantial economic effect? You say what, Mena? You don't think so. Anyone think so, or you're emphatic to say no economic substantiality? Anyone have a strong opinion here? Do these picture view of Ron and Nikki? Ron's from the U.S., Nikki's from, what's your favorite country, Nikki? Hi. Italy? Did I hear? Oh yeah. Nikki's from Italy. All right. And in that particular fact pattern, again, but let me ask you a question, Ron, Nikki. Does this feel substantial to you? Are the consequences going to be significant or insignificant, this allocation? What do you think? What's your gut, since you're the two partners? Daniil, David, do you feel that they should, are these of significance, not significance? You think they're significant. Why, Daniil? You gotta say it loudly.
U.S. tax and foreign tax.
I'm sorry?
U.S. tax will have tax consequences.
But they'll each have their own tax consequences. Nikki may not because she's from Italy and the income she earns will be from Italy. But let me just tell you the answer. These won't be substantial. Ron and Nikki will feel it's being substantial because at the beginning of the year, they can't predict how much money they're going to make. By having this allocation, Ron may end up with $10 and Nikki end up with $10,000, right? Because so it has serious economic consequences that are substantial in nature, right? Economically, and it could go the other way, right? Then what?
There is no partnership.
Well, there is. They're working together to generate this money. They're working hard, but one's going to earn foreign source, one's going to earn U.S., but that's going to have consequences aside from just the tax, right? It's not purely tax driven, right? So this will have substantiality. And here, guys, if you go to regulation 704-1B5, where all these examples are, example 5. Okay? You don't even need one little I, two little I. Just example 5 is right on point. And example 10, one little I, says that as long as the allocations are independent of tax consequences, this will be substantial. Now, if you keep reading, and not surprising that's what the authors do, question B is more suspect. What result if the agreement provides that all income will be shared equally, but D will be allocated all the foreign source income up to the dollar amount of her 50% of income? So now, that looks a little tricky because in this case, whatever monies they earn, okay, they're going to split 50-50. But now, strategically, the foreign source income is going to be allocated to Nikki up to that 50%, right? So here, certainly Nikki's going to be better off, and Ron, U.S. taxpayers tax on worldwide income, right? He's no worse off, right? Nikki's better off, Ron is no worse off, and economically they're going to get the same dollar amount as if there were no allocation, right? It's just strategically allocating the foreign income to Nikki to minimize her U.S. tax exposure, right? So yes, all the capital accounts can be maintained and all this eloquence, but it lacks substantiality. This is what is known as a shifting allocation, not transitory, guys. Shifting allocation. And the regulations say this does not work. This is example 6, 7 2 little I, and 10 2 little I. I'll repeat. The regulations specifically say example 6, example 7 2 little I, and 10 2 little I, that this would not work, and then you have to ignore this allocation and reallocate in accordance with PIP. And essentially, under PIP, each one would be allocated 50% of U.S. and foreign income. Each one would get, because that's their economic arrangement. Question C. Assume instead at the beginning of the year, it can be predicted that the relative dollar amounts of U.S. and foreign source income will be roughly equal. Okay, so you can predict that to be true, unlike problem A. What result if the agreement provides as in A above, that all U.S. source income will be allocated to C, and all foreign source income shall be allocated to D? Is that problematic? Yes, right, George? That's problem A. It wasn't problematic because no one could predict. But if you can predict it, and now we know that Nikki in my example is going to be better off, and Ron is going to be no worse off, then this fails the test. So once again, I will cite you to example 7, 1 little I, and 3 little I, and example 10, 1 little I, and this will not cut it, guys. This fails the shifting problem. Final question for tonight. Question 3. E and F form a limited partnership, purchase and lease computer for $1 million. E, the limited partner contributes 990 or 99%. F contributes 10,000. Okay. Agreement provides that the cost recovery deductions allocated entirely to E, and all other items of income or loss allocated 99% to E until she has been allocated income equal to his share of the cost recovery deductions and partnership losses. Thereafter, E and F will share the income and losses equally, assuming that the capital account, liquidation, distribution, and deficit restoration tests are met. Will these allocations be respected? So in other words, we've met the economic effect, and now what's going to happen here is these depreciation deductions are going to be taken, but then notice that E is going to be allocated income to the extent of the prior cost recovery deductions. And I will just call to your attention in the interest of time is in the examples that I cited you, this is again Elizabeth's favorite section, 704-1B5, that's where the examples are all housed. Example 2, there is a predictable stream of income. And 704-1B5, example 3, not predictable. And what the regulations posit is where if there's a predictable stream of income, there could be a transitory, over a multi-year period, a transitory issue where over a multi-year period, one taxpayer is better off and no taxpayer is worse off. But that's predicated on the fact that it's predictable. In example 3, where it's not predictable, akin to when Nikki and Ron did not know how much income was going to be earned, so there could be serious tax consequences with their allocation, real economic consequences. Similarly, if you can't predict the cash flow here, then there is likely not to be a transitory problem. So what you have to do, and I know that Elizabeth is excited to do, is go back, right, Elizabeth, and reread some of the examples in the regulations. And with problem 3, what I want you to do is compare and contrast example 2 with example 3. All right? And that will be elucidated. Now hear me for 2 more minutes before you close your books, okay? Very important. Let me make a statement, because the whole night you're hearing me talk about substantial economic effect and capital accounts have to have consequences. Everyone agree? Capital accounts have to have consequences. Now I'm going to blow your mind, because the next section, beginning on page 151, deals with what are called non-recourse allocations, non-recourse. And just so you don't think you were drinking too much, what you're about to witness when you do your reading is that when it comes to non-recourse deductions, that they will not have substantial economic effect. And notwithstanding they will not have substantial economic effect, they will be respected. Okay, let me repeat that. That non-recourse deductions, even though they lack substantial economic effect, they will have they will be respected, the allocations, but with one predicate. If you get the deduction, okay, you get the deduction, okay, you're happy you got the deduction, and guess what? You don't have to bear the loss, right? The bank is bearing the loss, right? So, in a very simple example, if you borrow $1 million, and you buy a building for $1 million, you take $20,000 in depreciation, you can still get that deduction, okay, that's the good news, get the deduction, but here's the quid pro quo. What's the quid pro quo? If that building is subsequently sold, or your partnership interest is subsequently sold, who gets tagged with the subsequent gain? Whoever was allocated the deduction that had no substantial economic effect must be charged back the minimum gain, okay? So you will see reference here to the fact that even though these allocations have absolutely no economic effect, no economic consequences because they're all non-recourse in nature, that you must, on a subsequent disposition, recognize the associated gain. So just for your reading next week, guys, bear that in mind. You have not lost your mind. We will persevere. I don't know exactly how far we'll get for next class. If you could, we're going to definitely finish this chapter. No piece of cake. I don't know how far we'll get, but it can't hurt you to read into chapter 5, a good portion of it. I will, let's just put it this way. Reading into chapter 5, exactly how far we'll get is not entirely clear, okay? So have a good night. Thank you for bearing with me, guys. And those on WebEx, thanks for bearing